Did that flight attendant just slap her while she was holding a baby? The gasp came from somewhere near seat 3C, but no one moved. For a moment, the cabin stood still. Time stretching like tension wire. A soft whimper broke the silence. Then a full cry. Then another. It was the baby, still in her arms. Amara Everett didn't scream, didn't sob. Her face, struck just seconds ago, remained turned in the direction of the slap, cheek still red. She gently bounced her son, Noah, on her shoulder and reached into her coat pocket with one hand. Calm, focused. Passengers watched as she unlocked her phone, opened an app they didn't recognize, scanned her thumb, and tapped a glowing red button. They had no idea what she had just done. But 5 minutes later, $1.3 billion in airline contracts froze. 3 partner carriers were delisted, and airports from Istanbul to Paris blacklisted the airline mid-air. And that crew? They had no clue who they just struck. But before all of that, tell us where you're watching from, because this one's gonna make your jaw drop. 30 minutes earlier. The plane had just taken off from Doha, en route to Istanbul. Business class was quiet. Polished wood grain accents, pale gray leather, gentle overhead lights dimmed for relaxation. And then came the soft cries. Not a tantrum, not a shriek, just an unsettled baby, 6 months old, adjusting to cabin pressure like thousands of babies before him. Amara cradled Noah close, patting gently. She was tired, not from the crying, but from what she knew would come next. She could feel it. The sighs, the side eyes, the heavy-handed courtesy smiles that quickly turned sour, the microaggressions hiding behind manners. This wasn't her first flight, and being a black woman with a baby in business class always carried extra attention. The first strike didn't come from a hand, it came from heels. Click, click, click. A sharp-sounding flight attendant approached. Her name tag read Ilona. Blonde, maybe Eastern European. Her lips were pressed in a line tight enough to slice paper. "Ma'am," Ilona snapped, "you need to quiet that baby. This is business class." Amara looked up, steady. "He's just adjusting to the cabin pressure. I'm doing my best." Ilona narrowed her eyes. "Well, maybe your best belongs back in economy." Amara blinked. "You need to lower your tone," she said evenly. "And I suggest you don't finish that sentence." "Oh, please," Ilona huffed. "You people think you can bring your whole world up here and make it everyone else's problem." And then she slapped her, full palm, across Amara's face, right in front of baby Noah. The sound cracked through the cabin. A man in row 2 turned. A woman up front clutched her armrest. No one spoke. Amara's eyes remained locked on the attendant. She didn't flinch. She didn't retaliate. Instead, she whispered softly to Noah, who was now crying out in confusion and fear. "You're okay, baby," she said. "Mommy's got you. She's got all of them." She reached into her coat, opened her phone, launched SkyBan, a secure platform with 3 layers of encryption used only in worst-case ethics emergencies. She scanned her fingerprint, verified her voice, and pressed a button glowing red. Emergency ethics lock triggered, reported by Dr. Amara Everett, Seat 3A violation, physical assault, cabin crew with infant present. Status: active. Real-time protocol engaged from Geneva to London. Terminal networks lit up. Within seconds, Sky Ethics Alliance had frozen ESG compliance scores tied to Helios Air, the airline responsible for Flight 774. Within 3 minutes, automated alerts reached 3 major European transport banks, triggering funding suspensions. By minute 5, 3 airline partners who shared Helios's ethics rating were flagged and delisted, unable to use approved gates in 12 cities. The entire ecosystem, carefully built over years, moved into motion because of one tap. Her tap. Back in the cabin, Ilona hadn't even realized what had just begun. She strutted off as if she had handled a situation. A supervisor arrived moments later, pretending calm. "Ma'am, we understand there may have been some tension," he said, voice syrupy. "We'd like to offer you a drink." Amara cut him off without raising her voice. "I don't want your drink. I want your accountability. But you're already too late. I'm not sure what you mean." "You will." She turned back to Noah, still soothing him gently, her fingers brushing over his curls. Passengers around her sat quietly, unsure how to respond. One older woman leaned over from across the aisle. "I saw what happened," she whispered. "If you need a witness." Amara nodded once. "Thank you. I already have the truth. I just needed someone willing to speak it." The plane touched down in Istanbul to chaos behind the scenes. Airport operations received emergency compliance notices. Ground crews were ordered not to refuel the aircraft. Helios's VIP lounge access was suspended. Within minutes, the flight was flagged, ethically grounded, across multiple terminals. Amara stepped off the plane without another word. She carried her baby with the grace of a woman who knew she didn't need to scream to shake the system. In the terminal, a Turkish gate agent ran up to her, panting. "Dr. Everett, please wait. The head of security, the airline director, they're asking to speak with you urgently." She adjusted Noah's blanket and kept walking. "I've already said everything I need to say," she said. "In code, in policy, in the system they thought I didn't know how to use." Behind her, chaos rippled through the network. Sky Ethics had activated a Level 4 ethics lockdown, something that had never happened in a commercial setting. Helios Air's stocks dropped 4% before European markets even opened. 3 of their biggest investment backers pulled out within 12 hours. And in a locked boardroom in Brussels, a vote was quietly taken. Ban Helios and its affiliates from all EU Sky access gates until further notice. All because one black mother with a doctorate in aviation policy got slapped and pressed a button she helped build. As Amara reached the airport's black car pickup, she looked down at Noah, now sleeping peacefully. She whispered, "Your mommy's voice was ignored for years, but today it shut the whole sky down." The morning sun hadn't even cleared the Istanbul skyline when Elias Everett received the call. He was already awake. He always was, especially when Amara flew. There was something about the silence in the house when she was gone. Too still, too wide. Without her laugh echoing down the halls or baby Noah's soft coos, the house felt like a structure, not a home. The call came through encrypted. SkyBan Protocol triggered. Status, Level 4 lockdown, initiated by Dr. Amara Everett. Flight, Helios Air 774 violation, physical assault. Flight crew, infant present. Elias blinked once, then stood. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. If Amara had triggered the protocol, it meant it wasn't just bad. It was systemic, and it was personal. He walked to the large screen in his study, opened the secure server, and logged into Sky Ethics Command Hub. A red banner was already flashing across the top of the interface. 3 affiliate airlines frozen. 12 major EU and ME airports blocked Sky access routes. 1.3 B in pending ESG-based credit now under review. And it had only been 47 minutes since the incident. Across the world, things were moving faster than anyone could contain. In Frankfurt, the legal team at Helios's investment bank was scrambling to explain why the airline's ESG risk score had suddenly dropped to critical on the global transport ledger. In Paris, SkyBan's internal watchdog committee was already reviewing real-time footage from the cabin. And in Istanbul, Amara stood calmly in the arrivals lounge, her coat draped over her arm, baby Noah snuggled to her chest. Her phone buzzed, once. A message from Elias. "I've activated Skygate override. You're clear to walk away. You'll never hear their name again." She smiled softly. Not from victory, but from clarity. Amara hadn't wanted to ruin anyone, but they had crossed a line that, once breached, couldn't be undone. Hours earlier, before the slap, before the silent rebellion that followed, Amara had been reading Noah a picture book on the plane. "See this one, baby?" she'd whispered. "That's a cloud, like the ones outside your window. We're riding through them." She had felt eyes on her then, watched Ilona, the flight attendant, whisper to a coworker while casting glances her way, saw the subtle side-eye of the man across the aisle who kept shifting uncomfortably. But she'd ignored it. She had work to do. Policy briefs on passenger dignity standards, notes for a presentation at the UN Civil Aviation Forum in Geneva next week. She didn't expect kindness, but she didn't expect assault either. After the incident, while still in the air, the plane's internal communications started lighting up. A second attendant named Mila, younger and clearly rattled, came to check on her. I'm sorry," Mila said quietly, kneeling slightly to meet Amara's eye level. "That should have never happened. We're being told to report anything now, but Ilona said you were being aggressive." Amara looked up. "I didn't say a single threatening word," she said calmly. "And I held my baby the entire time. There are cameras in this cabin. That's all I need." Mila's face crumpled. "I believe you. I really do. You just have to say it when they ask," Amara replied. "Belief doesn't change systems. Testimony does." At Istanbul Airport, Helios Air scrambled to manage optics. A team of mid-level execs and PR handlers waited at the gate, hoping to offer an apology, a refund, maybe a hotel voucher. But Amara walked right past them, refusing all contact. She wasn't looking for hush money. She was the architect of the system they were now suffocating in, and they didn't even realize it. By midday, news outlets had picked up fragments of the story. Social media was on fire. A clip surfaced, grainy but real, showing a black woman holding a baby, being slapped by a uniformed flight attendant. Someone on board had caught it. It went viral within an hour. "She was so calm," one passenger posted on X, "like she knew they were about to burn for this. Why did they think they could put hands on her while she held a baby?" another wrote. Elias, meanwhile, was coordinating crisis talks with 12 international ethics boards. Sky Ethics issued a Level 4 public dignity statement, a move reserved for only the most flagrant violations. 2 hours later, the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, requested an urgent ethics panel review. 3 airline CEOs canceled scheduled appearances at an ESG summit in Rome. In Geneva, where Amara and Elias lived, the story was now everywhere. But the power of it wasn't just the slap. It was the silence after, and the system Amara had built that responded without her needing to shout. That night, back at their home in South Kensington, Amara tucked Noah into his bassinet and joined Elias on the balcony. City lights blinked beyond them. A stillness hovered between their breathing. "You okay?" Elias asked. "I'm tired," she said honestly, "but I'm not shaken." "You did the right thing." "I know." She sipped her tea, looked out across the skyline, then added, "They'll expect an apology. They can expect whatever they want. You're not the one who needs to say sorry." Amara turned toward him, eyes soft but clear. "I don't want vengeance." Elias nodded. "You didn't get vengeance. You gave them consequences." Tomorrow, she would be in front of a camera, not for press, but for policy. She would be briefing the Sky Ethics Consortium on a new proposed clause, zero-tolerance infant risk mandate, and her case would be used as the standard. The woman they slapped was the one who wrote the rule book on dignity, and now the world would watch her write a new chapter. Amara Everett didn't walk into rooms with a need to prove herself anymore. Not since she'd rewritten the ethical guidelines that most of the global aviation industry now depended on to stay in business. But today wasn't a normal meeting. This wasn't a policy summit or a routine ethics hearing. This was an emergency session of the Sky Ethics Consortium, with representatives dialing in from Brussels, Singapore, Toronto, Lagos, and Washington, D.C. And at the center of it all, Flight 774. The incident had reached a boiling point faster than anyone expected. But what none of them knew, what the airline was only beginning to understand, was just how deep Amara's influence ran. She wasn't just a policy advisor. She was the co-founder of SkyEthics' International Passenger Dignity Framework. She was one of 3 people in the world with override clearance to initiate a Level 4 lockdown without a review panel. And 5 minutes after that slap, she'd pulled the trigger. "Thank you for convening so quickly," Amara said, her voice steady as she addressed the virtual room of regulators, executives, and legal officers. Behind her, a large screen displayed paused footage of the in-flight assault. "I'm not here for revenge," she continued. "I'm here for integrity. Because if a woman holding her baby can be assaulted mid-air by a uniformed crew member and nothing happens, then this whole system we built means nothing." No one spoke. She took a breath, then tapped her tablet. The system worked exactly as it was designed to. Funding froze. Contracts were halted, gate privileges revoked. But the question we must now face is, how did this still happen? And what do we do next? While Amara led the summit, Helios Air was imploding behind the scenes. The airline's board of directors had gone into full crisis mode. Their chief ethics officer resigned within 12 hours of the incident. Their ESG compliance advisor was placed on indefinite leave. The CEO, Martin Duval, was still unreachable. Rumors swirled that he was on a private jet en route to Dubai, trying to negotiate side deals to preserve routes before they were all canceled. But it was too late. The damage was viral, financial, and regulatory all at once. On the ground, stories were pouring in. Passengers from Flight 774 had begun speaking to media anonymously. One man posted a video from the gate after the incident. She didn't yell, didn't argue. She just pressed one button, like she knew the system would do the rest. You could feel it. She wasn't scared. She was in control. A Turkish airline worker shared on Instagram, "We were told to reroute Helios planes because their ethics score dropped to non-compliant." That's serious. I've never seen that before, and it was her report that did it. Back in the US, headlines ran wild. "Woman holding infant slapped mid-flight. Turns out she wrote the rules airlines follow." Dr. Amara Everett quietly topples 3 airlines in 5 minutes. The most powerful voice in aviation just made a statement without saying a word. After the meeting ended, Amara sat in silence in her office. No cameras, no noise, just her, and the question she had buried for years. Was it enough? She never wanted to be famous, never wanted headlines or hashtags. She had built systems like SkyBan and SkyEthics because she knew what it felt like to be dismissed, talked over, and judged. All while doing everything right. Being black, being a mother, being too composed, being too qualified. There was always a reason they found to look past her. Until now. Now the world was looking directly at her and listening. Later that night, Elias returned home after a security briefing in Brussels. He found Amara curled up on the couch, baby monitor on the table, CNN muted on the screen. He leaned over, kissed her forehead. "You didn't flinch," he said softly. "I couldn't afford to," she replied. "You know what the banks are calling this?" Amara raised an eyebrow. "The Everett event," she snorted. "Sounds like a cosmic disaster." "Depends who you ask," Elias said with a grin. "To Helios, it was." The next morning, something unexpected happened. A woman, older, sharp-eyed, with a French accent, requested a private meeting with Amara. She introduced herself as Colette Monnier, former head of passenger ethics at Air Lux, one of the top-rated luxury carriers in Europe. "I've followed your work for years," Colette said, her tone reverent. "But I never thought I'd see the day a system you designed would actually trigger against the people it was meant to restrain." Amara didn't respond immediately. Colette leaned forward. "I've retired, but I still sit on the Global Flight Accord Advisory Board. We're proposing a motion to name a new clause under the Passenger Dignity Framework." Amara tilted her head. "What clause?" Colette smiled. "The Everett Clause. automatic ethics lockdown triggered if a crew member commits physical violence against a passenger holding a dependent child. Amara blinked. That's not necessary. Colette's smile didn't fade. Neither was a slap. The very next day, Sky Ethics ratified the clause unanimously. Within 48 hours, the FAA, ESA, and ICAO all issued provisional adoption notices, and 17 major international airports updated their operational policy to include the Everett clause, effective immediately. Helios Air, their ethics score remained frozen. Their emergency audit revealed 4 previous complaints of physical intimidation by the same flight attendant, Ilona, buried by internal staff. Ilona was terminated. So was the supervisor who enabled her. Back in Geneva, Amara took Noah for a walk by Lake Leman. A light breeze passed over the water, and Noah laughed at the wind catching his curls. Amara crouched next to his stroller and whispered, "You won't remember this, baby, but one day, when they ask why things changed, they'll say it started because your mother didn't scream." She documented. They called it the slap scene around the skies. Within 48 hours, footage from Flight 774 had been viewed over 92 million times across platforms, not just for the violence, but for the silence that followed. Because Amara Everett didn't scream, she didn't fight. She held her baby, pressed one button, and watched the world rearrange itself around her. The video came from a quiet young man in seat 14A. No one even noticed he was recording. He uploaded the footage with the caption, "She didn't deserve that. Neither did the baby." That's all it took. CNN ran a segment called The Quietest Rebellion. NPR aired a piece titled Dignity Under Fire, When Calm Becomes Power. Even Trevor Noah posted, "Forget CEOs yelling on planes. This woman pressed a button. Now watch 3 airlines melt." Amara sat in silence. Her baby Noah curled asleep against her chest while the world erupted outside. Her inbox filled with interview requests. Politicians, think tanks, women's organizations. Even the White House wanted to comment. But she wasn't ready to speak, not yet. Because something kept haunting her. No one had apologized. Not Ilona, the flight attendant. Not the airline. Not the flight crew who watched it happen. All she got was a generic, "We are conducting an internal review" email that made her want to laugh. Or scream. Or both. Instead, she forwarded the email to her legal team. Then she called her mother. "Mom," she said quietly, holding the phone between her shoulder and cheek while cleaning up Noah's bottle. "You saw the video?" "Baby, the whole neighborhood saw that video. The girls at church haven't stopped talking." Amara sighed. "I didn't want this attention." Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. "You didn't ask for it, but now it's here. So you choose what to do with it. Just like you always have." Pause. "And for the record, I'm proud of how you held your ground." That woman forgot who she was touching. Amara didn't speak for a moment. Then she smiled. "Thanks, Mom." That same evening, an unexpected delivery arrived at the Everett home. A man in a crisp navy suit stood at the door holding a small box, marked confidential. It wasn't from Helios Air. It was from Sky Vista Compliance Commission, a private auditing firm contracted by multiple global aviation ethics boards. Inside the box was a flash drive and a letter. "Dr. Everett, per Clause 814 of the Passenger Ethics Cross-Verification Treaty, you are entitled to receive sealed staff records if directly involved in a Tier 1 ethical breach. We believe the contents of this file are of interest." What she saw next shifted everything. The flash drive contained a full misconduct history of Ilona, the flight attendant. 7 prior complaints in 4 years, 2 for physical aggression, 5 for racially coded language. 1 passenger in 2022, a single black mother, had filed a written complaint after being publicly humiliated by Ilona for bringing a screaming child on board. The case was closed internally. No disciplinary action. Worse, a memo showed that Ilona had been flagged twice for emotional instability under pressure, but cleared for international flights anyway. Amara's hand shook as she closed the files. It wasn't just a slap. It was a system that had protected a pattern. And now that system had a spotlight on it. She knew what she had to do. The next day, Amara appeared live on national television, not as a victim, as a witness. Standing in front of a black backdrop with only a single photo of Noah behind her, she spoke plainly. What happened to me was not an isolated incident. This flight crew didn't just fail me. They failed every passenger who saw a mother attacked and said nothing. And the airline? They protected that failure over and over again. But we're done whispering about it. Today, I'm filing a formal federal ethics violation against Helios Air and its 3 partner carriers. I'm calling for a full Senate review of passenger safety for parents traveling with dependents. And I'm activating the SkyBan Protocol under international treaty, banning Helios from operating in 38 airports worldwide until they adopt the passenger integrity framework. This is not about punishment. This is about prevention. And most of all, this is about what happens when we stop asking for justice and start designing it. The fallout was immediate. Helios stock dropped 17% in 1 hour. 2 partner airlines, SkyZion and Aerolux, scrambled to distance themselves. 3 airport coalitions froze their contracts. The FAA confirmed it would open a full inquiry. And for the first time in public history, a passenger-led federal ethics complaint triggered a joint investigation by the FAA, EACA, and ICAO, a tri-continent regulatory response. They didn't just watch the slap, they acted because of it. But perhaps the most powerful moment happened days later, when Amara received a letter. It wasn't official, it wasn't corporate, it was handwritten, and it came from a woman named Rhea, who had sat in 13B on that flight. It read, "Dr. Everett, I froze when I saw her hit you. I should have said something, I didn't, and I've hated myself for it ever since. But then I watched what you did, how you held your child, how you pressed that button like it was the calmest thing in the world. You didn't just protect your baby, you protected us too. Thank you for showing the world how power looks in silence." That night, Amara held Noah a little longer. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "You'll never have to ask if your voice matters, because mine already answered." Amara Everett had expected legal blowback. What she didn't expect was reverence. Within 72 hours of her televised statement, her name had been cited in more than 200 policy memos, 47 news editorials, and 15 university law blogs dissecting her use of the SkyBan Protocol. But Amara wasn't celebrating. She was preparing, because she knew what came next. Pushback from the old guard. And they wouldn't come at her directly. They'd go after the systems she built. It started with a whisper, an anonymous op-ed in the Financial Times titled, "Too Much Power in One Passenger's Hands?" The article didn't name her, but it questioned whether non-elected individuals should be able to override aviation access globally. That same day, a retired airline executive went on cable news and called Amara's actions emotional and disproportionate. She'd seen this tactic before: minimize, dismiss, reframe her calm as irrational, her expertise as emotion. But this time, they weren't just questioning a black woman's response. They were challenging the very ethics charter she helped write. That evening, Amara received a call, not from a journalist, not from an airline, but from Senator Anika Jordan. "Dr. Everett," Anika said, voice low, calm. "The FAA committee wants your testimony." Amara paused. "They're convening hearings?" Senator Jordan exhaled. "Not just hearings, they're reopening the Aviation Accountability Act. You've started something bigger than you realize." Amara leaned back. Not just personal justice, legislative reform. 1 week later, she entered Capitol Hill, hair pulled back, baby Noah with her. No nannies, no assistants, just her, holding the same child she held during the slap. The moment she stepped into the chamber, there was silence. Not because of who she was, but because of what she represented. A mother, a passenger, a systems architect. And now, a catalyst. The testimony lasted 4 hours. Amara laid out her case with precision and clarity. She spoke not as a victim, but as a builder of compliance systems used across 19 countries. She showed proof of repeated FAA negligence in upholding ethics flagging. She shared data from Sky Ethics showing that passengers with young children were 4.8x more likely to be de-escalated with force, especially if they were black or brown. And then, finally, she offered a solution. I'm proposing the formal adoption of the Passenger Dignity Mandate, a binding federal clause requiring all U.S. licensed airlines to implement nonviolent de-escalation training, immediate third-party ethics review for any use of force on parents with dependents, biometric logging of cabin interactions. If an airline fails to comply, it loses access to the Sky Ethics Green List, which 63 international airports now require for clearance. When she finished, no one clapped. They sat in silence, some stunned, some humbled, some afraid. Because she hadn't just testified, she'd redefined the rules of flight. That night, Amara returned home exhausted. Her baby was finally asleep. The lights were off. The house was quiet. Until her husband Elias walked in holding a letter. "It's from ICAO," he said. "Came via secure courier." Amara opened it slowly. Inside, a formal acknowledgement. The Everett Clause is now under preliminary adoption for international aviation law review. You have restructured the framework for what passenger dignity means in a post-pandemic world. The next morning, something even more unexpected happened. Her former law professor, Dr. Samuel Graves, the man who once told her she'd never lead from behind a screen, wrote an op-ed in The Atlantic titled, "The Quiet Rewrite of Aviation Law, Led by a Black Mother." He ended the article with, "What began with a slap ended with a system rewriting itself to prevent the next." Dr. Everett did not yell. She simply made sure her son would never need to. At Helios HQ, panic had set in. 3 ethics audits were in full swing. Board members resigned. Investors began pulling ESG funds. In the middle of it all, a whistleblower leaked a memo. Flight 774 incident could have been avoided. Internal flagging on Ilona was suppressed to meet staffing minimums. It was the final nail. The CEO of Helios stepped down live on CNBC. But even then, Amara made no comment. She didn't need to. The world was speaking for her now. One last surprise came quietly. From the United Nations, they requested her attendance at the Geneva Global Passenger Rights Summit as keynote speaker. The invitation letter ended simply, "Because silence is not absence. Sometimes it is the sound of power shifting." That night, Amara stood on her balcony, wind in her curls, her baby finally asleep, breathing soft in the next room. Elias came up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. "Do you think it's over?" he whispered. She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, but I think it's beginning again. On our terms, this time." She closed her eyes and let the quiet speak for her. For a few days, the world believed Helios Air might just admit defeat. They had been caught red-handed. A viral slap, an ethics meltdown, a global compliance freeze. Most companies would have cut their losses, but not Helios. Not yet. Because deep inside the boardrooms of their Manhattan headquarters, a plan was brewing. Not to apologize, but to retaliate. Their first move? Leak stories painting Amara as volatile, media-hungry, obsessed with control. An anonymous source told one paper she threatened to ruin the careers of the innocent. Another hinted at conflict of interest between her and Sky Ethics, suggesting she might have manipulated the audit outcome. None of it stuck. But they didn't need it to be true. They just needed people to doubt her. Meanwhile, Ilona, the flight attendant, went on a right-wing podcast, cried on camera, claimed she was the victim, said Amara shoved her shoulder first, accused her of using the baby as a shield to escalate things. That clip went viral too, but not in the way they wanted. The comments section destroyed her. You slapped a woman holding a baby. There's no recovery from that. You're crying because the world finally saw what you are. Back in Baltimore, Amara kept silent. Not because she was afraid, because she was focused. Her legal team had just uncovered an internal document that could dismantle Helios Air entirely. It was buried in a compliance database, a memo titled Code 7B Override, Ethics Flag Suppression Protocol, Pilot Program Only. It revealed that for the past 18 months, Helios had intentionally suppressed ethics flags on staff flagged 3 times or less in an effort to reduce crew turnover. Ilona had been flagged twice, which meant Helios saw the warning signs and chose silence. Amara forwarded the document straight to the FAA, but before the FAA could respond publicly, Helios went nuclear. They filed a civil defamation suit against Amara Everett, $10 million in damages, claiming her press conference caused irreparable financial harm and that her personal bias against the airline industry constituted intentional sabotage. It was a bold move, one they hoped would rattle her. But Amara didn't flinch. She told her lawyer, "Let's not settle. Let's make them prove every lie." News of the lawsuit spread like wildfire, but instead of isolating her, it rallied the public. Parents who'd been kicked off flights, passengers wrongfully removed, flight attendants who were punished for speaking up. People flooded her inbox. One message read, "You're not suing them alone. You're suing for all of us who never got to press record." And then something surprising happened. Former Helios employees began contacting her. A gate agent, a training supervisor, even a mid-level HR director, each with their own horror story, each willing to testify. One woman, a Latina mother, shared that she'd been fired for reporting a pilot who used racial slurs. Amara added her to the list. The trial was set for federal court in D.C., but before they could even walk in, a bombshell dropped. Reuters released a leak from the FAA investigation. Preliminary findings confirm systemic ethics flag suppression across 3 Helios-affiliated carriers. Compliance failures may affect international airspace access. Boom! Helios Air was officially under multi-agency investigation. Within hours, their access to 4 major European airports was suspended. $610 million in ESG-linked funding was frozen. 2 of their insurance partners pulled out. Suddenly, the lawsuit against Amara looked like what it truly was: a distraction, a cover-up, and an act of desperation. The court date arrived. Federal courthouse, full press presence, overflow room packed. Amara walked in wearing a navy suit, holding Noah's small hand. No fear, no PR team, just quiet resolve. The judge looked at both legal teams and asked a simple question: "Why are we here?" Helios's attorney stammered through a long-winded explanation. Then Amara's attorney stood and handed over the Code 7B memo. The courtroom fell silent. The judge skimmed the first page, then looked up. "Is this document authenticated?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And did the defendant cause this to be leaked?" "No, Your Honor. The document came from a public compliance database after the SkyBan Protocol was triggered." Another pause. Then the judge said something no one expected. "I'm throwing this case out. Not only is this not defamation, this court is recommending that the DOJ initiate fraud investigations against Helios Air for intentional ethics suppression." Helios's legal team went pale. Amara smiled for the first time in weeks. She didn't win money. She won momentum. By the end of the week, 3 Helios board members resigned. The CEO officially stepped down, and Amara Everett was invited to serve as interim ethics advisor to the FAA's new Passenger Protection Task Force. The slap that tried to silence her had become the start of an entire federal reform movement. That night, Amara tucked Noah into bed. He looked up at her, curious. "Mommy, do planes listen now?" She chuckled softly, brushing hair from his forehead. "Some do," she said. "The rest will learn." The irony wasn't lost on Amara Everett. After all the noise, headlines, hearings, and viral clips, after depositions and disgraceful press leaks and one collapsing CEO after another, it wasn't a courtroom that finally unraveled Helios. It was a quiet email, a subject line so sterile it could have been an invoice. Subject: Notice of suspension. Route code 449, 450, 441, but attached was a document that would devastate an empire. The email came from the Director of International Gate Access Compliance at ICAO. It stated plainly, Helios Air's failure to comply with international ethics synchronization protocols under the SkyBan Treaty has resulted in the temporary revocation of transatlantic routing codes 449, 450, and 451. These codes correspond to New York, JFK, Heathrow, LHR, Los Angeles, LAX, Charles de Gaulle, CDG, Atlanta, ATL, Frankfurt, FRA, 3 of their most profitable international routes. Gone. Effective immediately. By noon, Amara's inbox was full. Reporters, analysts, foreign regulators. Even the CEO of an unrelated European airline wrote to her privately, "I have studied your ethics systems. We will be implementing the Passenger Dignity Protocol company-wide. Thank you, Dr. Everett. You changed the standard." But Amara didn't reply to anyone that day, because her real work wasn't in her inbox. It was in her son's room, on the floor, building a wooden airport with toy runways and plastic terminals. "I gave all the pilots candy," Noah announced, handing her a tiny Lego. "They fly better when they're happy," she smiled. "Wish the real ones understood that." Meanwhile, in Geneva, the Global Flight Integrity Council convened. The chairwoman called for a vote. On the table, the formal adoption of the Everett Clause, a treaty-level framework making passenger dignity an enforceable legal standard. The vote passed, 23-2. The only 2 against it, airlines that no longer had access to SkyEthics' green list. That night, Amara received a message from an unexpected name. Ilona Zarka, the former flight attendant, the one who'd slapped her, the woman at the center of it all. The message was short. "I lost everything. I thought I was just doing my job. I didn't realize your silence was louder than all of us. I'm sorry." Amara stared at the screen for a long time, then deleted the message. Some things didn't require replies. 3 days later, the FAA issued its formal directive. As of July 1, 2025, any airline failing to implement the Passenger Equity Framework will be considered non-compliant for domestic and international routing approvals. That meant ethics flags were now mandatory review triggers. Physical interactions with passengers had to be biometrically logged. Discriminatory or escalatory behavior from crew could jeopardize route access. And at the center of the directive was a phrase that stunned even Amara. This framework will hereby be referred to as the Everett Standard. She didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just whispered, "Let it hold." A month later, she stood inside a redesigned Helios terminal, one now operated by a new ownership group. The old branding was gone. In its place, Sky Dignity Airlines, the first US-based carrier to be fully ethics certified under the Everett Standard. A young black woman in a crisp new uniform walked up. "Dr. Everett?" Amara turned. The woman beamed. "I trained on your ethics modules. It's required now for all of us. We start every shift with a check-in that says, 'Passenger dignity is non-negotiable.' It's changed everything." Amara smiled gently. "Good." The woman hesitated, then added, "Also, I hope you don't mind, but we named the infant seating program after your son." Amara's eyes widened. The woman explained, "It's called the Noah Zone, a priority space for parents flying with young children. No extra charge, no judgment, just room to breathe." That time, Amara did cry. She walked through the terminal in silence after that. Every flight number felt like a sigh released. Every boarding announcement felt like closure. But she didn't go straight home. Instead, She stopped at a quiet corner of the airport, a window overlooking a tarmac where planes ascended like prayers. She stood there for a long while, until Elias found her. "Hey," he said. "They're asking if you'll speak at the UN again." She shook her head. "Let someone else take the mic," she said. "I've said what I needed." He nodded, then pulled something from his coat pocket, a small metal plate, about palm-sized, etched with, "In honor of Dr. Amara Everett, who taught us that dignity doesn't need to shout." "Where did you get that?" she asked, touched. "They're installing it on the foundation beam of the new FAA Ethics Command Center in DC." She looked down at the plate, then up at the sky. No more slaps, no more whispered protocols, no more gate agents deciding who looked like they belonged. Just systems, truth, and a new standard, written in her name. By now, most of America had heard the story. They knew about the slap, the baby, the billionaire husband no one saw coming, the 1.3B freeze, the 3 airlines blacklisted, and the protocol that changed aviation overnight. But what they didn't know, what no one but a handful of people in Washington knew, was that Amara Everett was about to walk into the most powerful room in aviation history, and not as a guest, as a founding architect. The new Passenger Ethics Command Center had been under construction for months. Located just outside DC, in a compound formerly used for federal communications testing, it had now been transformed into a war room for dignity. Every airline wishing to operate in U.S. or U.S.-aligned airspace would now be evaluated here, not just for safety, but for ethics. A shift so radical, some lobbyists called it a corporate Geneva Convention. Amara wasn't interested in the nickname. She was interested in results. Inside the center, 14 ethics analysts sat behind reinforced glass. They weren't lawyers. They weren't bureaucrats. They were civilian passengers, veterans, educators, mothers who had been kicked off planes for having autistic kids, teenagers who had been told their seat wasn't for someone like them. Amara had handpicked every one of them, because for once, the system would remember who it was meant to protect. A senior FAA liaison turned to her as she entered. "Dr. Everett, your personal clearance has been finalized. Full override access." He handed her a small silver card with a Sky Ethics insignia. "Careful," he added with a smile. "That card can ground fleets." She took it gently. "Only when they deserve it," she replied. Meanwhile, headlines around the world began calling the new framework the Everett Doctrine. Journalists described it as the moment where consumer justice finally got teeth, the end of anonymous cruelty at 30,000 feet, the first time a slap rewrote global aviation policy. But Amara avoided the media. She stayed with the team, training, testing, listening. One morning, as she walked the main hallway of the command center, she passed a memorial wall. On it were digital portraits of passengers who had been wronged. Some had gone viral. Others never got their stories heard. But each face was proof. Silence had cost too much. She paused at a photo of a young black father holding his crying daughter on a delayed tarmac. Amara whispered under her breath, "No one forgets you now." Then came the test case. An international carrier, Nova Skyways, based out of South Africa, had failed to comply with ethics on boarding across 5 flights. But unlike Helios, they didn't deflect. They didn't sue. They sent a full internal audit, suspended 17 employees voluntarily, and requested guidance to rebuild under the Everett standard. It was the first time an airline didn't just obey. They believed. And Amara approved them for provisional compliance. The media expected fireworks. Instead, they got grace. But not everyone was happy. A senator from a southern state held a hearing claiming the FAA was weaponizing empathy. He called the passenger equity framework an overreach by unelected emotionalists. Amara watched the hearing from her office, When asked to testify, she sent a simple message. What's being called emotional is actually measurable harm. Every slap, every scream, every ejection without reason, we finally have tools to track them. That's not overreach, that's accountability. The next day, the senator quietly withdrew his opposition. One night, well past midnight, Amara found herself in the main observation room alone. Dozens of screens blinked with real-time cabin feedback, passenger reports, biometric stress indicators, crew behavior scores. Elias walked in holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're not sleeping." She shook her head. "There's a flight from Dallas. Crew seems tense. Same gate that ejected that boy last year. You've rebuilt the whole system. You can breathe." She looked at him. "That's the problem, Elias. I don't think we've rebuilt it. We just finally saw what it always was. Now we have to keep watching." 2 weeks later, a small commuter airline violated the protocol. A mother of 3, black, low income, was forcibly moved from her seat so a platinum member could be more comfortable. No one recorded it. But the biometric sensors picked up everything. Raised heart rates, escalated crew tones, aggressive hand movements. The footage was flagged, and within 17 minutes, the airline's route access to 4 mid-size airports was temporarily revoked. Passengers on board were rebooked automatically, with compensation. The news broke the next day. New FAA Ethics Center grounds regional carrier in 17 minutes after dignity violation. The world had changed, and now it could respond fast enough to matter. That weekend, Amara went home to Baltimore. Noah was playing in the yard with his Lego planes. He looked up and asked, "Do planes still slap people?" She smiled, kneeling next to him. "Not if they want to keep flying." He nodded, satisfied, then added, "Can I be in charge when you're done?" She laughed. "You already are. You're the reason any of this started." It started as a flicker, a red pulse on a dashboard screen. Then 2, then 7. Inside the Ethics Monitoring Command Center, built under FAA Regulation 74B, the entire Northeast Quadrant went active. 7 flights, 4 airlines, all flashing ethics violation, priority code red. On screen, a crew member could be seen shoving an elderly passenger's carry-on back at her lap. Another screen showed a child being told to shut up or be removed. In Detroit, a black family was bypassed for meal service while every other row was served. The AI didn't hesitate. The system triggered what Amara Everett designed, Gridlock Light, a temporary ethics-based routing pause that held flights from pushing back until human analysts confirmed or cleared the violations. And this time, it didn't take hours. It took 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Amara was mid-call with Geneva when she saw the flags. Her tablet buzzed. She paused. "Give me a moment." The alert flashed in all caps. Live ethics lock engaged, 4 carriers held, 2 under watch for secondary trigger. She stood up slowly, walked over to the control glass, and leaned in. Each screen showed a different story. Each one was disturbingly familiar. But this time, no child had to cry. No mother had to beg. The system had intervened before escalation. The dignity alarms worked. The data had remembered. Inside the command floor, an ethics analyst named Priya Chan leaned back in her chair. She had helped design the real-time sentiment model. It tracked crew tone, passenger volume, facial micro-expressions, and even wrist tension. But today wasn't about tech. It was about a decision. Her voice came through the comms. "Helios Regional Crew 781F. Confirmed second infraction within 48 hours. Recommend full ethics grounding." The room fell silent. This was the first time since Helios's rebrand that a new violation had reached second trigger threshold. Elias turned to Amara. "Do we ground them again?" Amara looked at the screen. The flight hadn't even left the gate. She nodded once. "Pull the jet. Issue the flag." The press caught wind by noon. Headline after headline spun up. Helios suspended again. Systems strike faster than CEOs. FAA gridlock triggers grounding in under 9 minutes. Everett standard holds. The ethics revolution, when a system cares more than people used to. One late-night anchor simply said, "If your airline doesn't have a soul, Amara Everett's system will get it one." Meanwhile, social media was ablaze. A TikTok from a teenage girl on board one of the grounded flights went viral. In it, she filmed the moment the captain came on intercom and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an ethics systems trigger, we will not be departing until further notice. Please know this is not a delay. It's a decision to respect your dignity." The girl captioned it, "Imagine living in a world where airlines protect you before hurting you." The video got 28 million views in 36 hours. Amara wasn't celebrating. She was thinking. At a press briefing, a journalist asked her, "You've built a system that predicts harm before it happens, but are you worried people will start gaming it? That it'll be seen as just another rule book to bend?" She stared for a long moment, then said, "Systems don't stop cruelty, but they interrupt it. And in that pause, between action and reaction, lies the chance to change." That night, she returned to Baltimore for the weekend. Elias was waiting on the porch. Noah had fallen asleep inside, curled up with a toy plane in one hand and an FAA security badge in the other. Amara's badge, laminated, now his favorite treasure. "You okay?" Elias asked. Amara exhaled. "We grounded 4 flights before Wheels Up. 4 families didn't have to live what we lived." He nodded. "You think it's enough?" She looked out at the night sky, where jets blinked silently across invisible lanes of air. "No," she said softly, "but it's more than we had, and it's faster than hope." The next morning, Amara got a message that made her stop in her tracks. It was from an international airport consortium based in Brussels. The European Passenger Board has voted unanimously to adopt the Everett standard across 61 cities. Ethics will now be a condition of code share agreements, tarmac access, and route bidding. Dignity will be global. She closed her eyes. She had expected a fight, but she hadn't expected momentum. And now, it was rolling. Later that week, the newly launched Sky Dignity app showed a new feature, a live passenger respect score, visible to every customer boarding a flight. Each airline had a real-time score updated every 15 minutes based on crew interaction, passenger reports, and biometric compliance logs. Consumers loved it. Airlines? Not so much. But one exec from a small regional line in Arizona stood out. He tweeted, "I don't like the Everett system because it makes my crew nervous, but I love it because it makes my passengers feel safe. That's worth more than any mile." Amara wasn't sure how long this would last. She knew systems could be corrupted. Data could be ignored. People could forget. But something was different now. Because dignity wasn't just an idea. It had dashboards, protocols, thresholds. And the truth was, when you build a system rooted in justice, it becomes harder to undo it quietly. The next person who tried, they'd have to do it in full view of a world that now knew better. As she walked past the command center one last time that day, a junior staffer stopped her. "Dr. Everett?" "Yes?" "We just got our first ethics thank you from a retired pilot. He said, and I quote, 'I didn't think I'd live long enough to see airlines become human again.'" Amara blinked hard, then smiled. "You tell him," she said. "We're just getting started." Amara Everett never wanted fame. She didn't build systems to trend. But what happened next? No one could have planned it. Not the government, not the airlines, not even Amara herself. Because dignity wasn't just rising from inside the cockpit. It was leaping out into the world. It began at Gate B12 in Minneapolis. A flight attendant named Jennifer, 15 years in the industry, noticed a mother traveling alone with a baby and a toddler. The kids were cranky. The mom looked exhausted, and the surrounding passengers were already side-eyeing her. Normally, Jennifer would have followed script. Smile. politely ask her to manage noise, move on. But this time, she did something else. She bent down, helped strap in the toddler, and gave the baby a soft blanket from first class. No one asked her to. No one filmed it. But the mother cried quietly and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." That small act of kindness? It was logged automatically in the Sky Dignity Feedback app, and when the plane landed, the crew got a +8 boost on their dignity score. 2 days later, a captain in Dallas voluntarily filed a report against his own co-pilot for belittling a Sikh passenger over religious attire. No passenger had complained. No camera caught it. But the captain had read Amara's framework. He knew silence was compliance. And that day, he chose something else. When asked why he filed it, the captain wrote, "Because we are now watched by systems that expect us to be better. And maybe that's not control. Maybe it's hope." The momentum was contagious. College students began forming Dignity Spotter Clubs, where they tracked airlines' behavior during spring break travel. Teachers started using Sky ethics scenarios in debate class. A Brooklyn school named a hallway after Amara Everett. And on a quiet Tuesday morning, the White House called. The invitation was formal. An Ethics and Innovation Presidential Summit. 20 speakers, global press, and one empty keynote slot, held for the woman who rewrote air travel with a single slap. Amara hesitated. She didn't like cameras. She didn't like applause. But Elias smiled and said, "You didn't ask for this platform, but you earned it." And so, she went. The room was larger than she expected, packed with CEOs, regulators, civil rights attorneys, and activists, but also flight attendants, single mothers, passengers who had been thrown off planes for looking suspicious, children who had once been duct-taped for being autistic. She wasn't here as a tech leader. She was here as proof. Proof that a system built by someone who understood injustice could change things faster than laws alone. Amara stood behind the podium. No slides, no script, just her voice. 2 years ago, I sat on a plane with my infant son and was slapped by someone who thought my dignity didn't matter. 5 minutes later, that someone learned my name wasn't just Amara. It was Everett, and my husband owned the plane. But this story was never about revenge. It's about designing systems that remember what cruelty looks like, so people don't have to survive it alone. Dignity is not a perk, it's a right. And every industry that forgets that is now on notice. The room stood up before she even finished, not out of protocol, but respect. After the speech, a young black girl approached her, 12, maybe 13. She wore a school uniform and held a laminated badge that said, "Youth Ethics Delegate." Her voice shook a little. "Ms. Everett, my mom says you saved her. She used to work crew on Helios. They treated her like trash when she got pregnant. But when she saw you stand up, she quit. Now she's training to join the Passenger Ethics Council. I just wanted to say thank you." Amara's eyes welled. She knelt down. "Tell your mom. She didn't need saving. She just needed the world to finally make room for her fire." By the end of that week, 3 more countries had adopted the Everett standard. Singapore integrated Sky Dignity into Changi Airport's terminal operations. Brazil made dignity audits mandatory for foreign carriers. And Canada launched its own version of the Passenger Respect Protocol. Global ethics had gone viral, not as a regulation, but as a cultural shift. Still, not everything was perfect. An airline tried to game the system by inflating positive reports using bots. Another tried to bribe a Sky ethics developer. But this time, whistleblowers weren't scared. They had a system backing them. And when the FAA dropped the hammer, suspending route access and imposing a $26 million penalty, the public cheered. For once, accountability wasn't quiet. It was loud, visible, unapologetic. Back in Baltimore, Amara sat in her garden with Noah asleep on her chest. Elias read the latest headlines aloud. Everett nominated for Presidential Medal of Freedom. The woman who made airlines human again. Amara Everett slap heard around the world. She chuckled. "This is so strange," she whispered. "I built software. I didn't mean to start a movement." But Elias put an arm around her. "You didn't start one," he said. "You named it. You gave it structure. You gave justice something to plug into." And that night, in airports from Atlanta to Amsterdam, flight attendants adjusted how they spoke. Passengers knew where to report. Kids with speech delays weren't forced to be silent. And black mothers holding babies? They were offered help, not suspicion. Because one woman held the line and made the skies a little less cruel. They always come for you in the end. When you build something bold, when you speak too clearly, when you make it impossible to ignore the truth. For Amara Everett, the backlash began quietly, then loudly, then strategically. A tabloid ran a headline. Was it staged? Sources say Everett's slap incident was engineered for sympathy. A former Helios PR director went on morning TV. "We have to ask ourselves if we're letting emotion drive policy. Should a personal story rewrite global aviation laws?" Then came the social media bots, accusing her of making up the slap, of using her baby as a prop, of weaponizing victimhood. Amara stayed silent. At first, but silence can only hold for so long, especially when they start going after the truth. CNN aired a debate segment. On one side, a civil rights lawyer. On the other, a former airline lobbyist. The lobbyist leaned in and said, "Let's be honest. This whole Everett protocol, it's theater. Planes don't need ethics, they need efficiency. You slow down takeoff by 12 minutes and you cost companies millions." The lawyer didn't flinch. "You know what else costs millions? Settlements for racial discrimination, for violent removals, for traumatized children. This isn't theater, it's the receipts." And Amara Everett gave the world a receipt book. The clip went viral, but so did the hate. Amara called a meeting at the Ethics Council, not to complain, but to clarify. "I will not argue with people who are comfortable with the silence," she said. "But I will make one thing very clear. We don't need to defend ourselves. We need to show the numbers." So they did. The council released a 3-month audit. 38% decrease in crew-passenger conflict incidents. 21% drop in forced removals. 58% increase in crew-initiated positive interactions. Over 940 million saved in lawsuits, flight delays, and operational corrections. The press tried to spin it, but math didn't lie. Still, one network pushed harder. They dug up Amara's early career, a misquoted email from a decade ago, an old interview out of context, a photo of her once accepting a donation from a controversial investor who she later rejected. They called it the Everett echo chamber, and for a moment, just a moment, it worked. A few senators paused their support for the Passenger Integrity Charter. A sponsor pulled out, and Amara felt it in her chest, that deep, familiar ache of being disbelieved not for what you did, but for who you are. Elias found her on the balcony that night. She was staring at the city skyline, silent. He didn't try to fix it, just stood beside her. She finally said, "I gave them a system, and they want to make it about me." Elias replied, "Because you didn't just design something that works. You designed something that makes cruelty visible. They were fine when injustice was quiet, but now it screams, and they're terrified." Amara didn't release a statement. She released a report. A 32-page public dossier. When Systems Care, the measurable impact of passenger ethics. She included real passenger stories, real video stills, testimonies from crew who'd once been silenced. She didn't defend herself. She defended results. Then, something remarkable happened. Across the country, passengers began posting videos. "This is me, getting help for my autistic son during boarding." Pre-Everett, they'd have duct taped him. Today, they offered support. "I wore my hijab on this flight, and no one questioned me." First time that's ever happened. They asked for pronouns during seat assignment. That's a first. Thank you, Amara Everett. It wasn't a hashtag. It was a movement. Real people, real dignity, no spin. Finally, one news anchor, who had previously doubted her, ended his segment with this. Whatever you think about Amara Everett's story, let's get one thing straight. Since her protocol went live, there's less fear at 30,000 feet. And if you can't respect the person who made that possible, maybe the problem isn't the system. Maybe it's you. That night, Amara sat at her kitchen table, sorting through letters. One was from an elderly man in Montana. He wrote, "I don't fly much anymore, but last week I took a trip to see my granddaughter. The crew called me by name, asked about my comfort. They said it was part of a new dignity program. I asked if it had a name. They said, 'We call it Everett now.' I wept, not because of my comfort, but because for once I felt like I mattered." Amara folded the letter gently, and for the first time in weeks, she cried. Not from pressure, not from fear, but from clarity. They could spin headlines. They could twist stories. But the system was working. It didn't happen all at once. No fireworks, no confetti drop. Just a slow, powerful shift. Like the tide turning at dusk, pulling every grain of sand towards something new. 2 years later, the world didn't talk about the slap anymore. Not because they forgot, but because they'd moved on to what came after. Every airline flying over U.S. airspace now followed the Everett Passenger Ethics Treaty. 42 airports embedded the Sky Dignity feedback system into their terminals, and international hubs from Seoul to Stockholm adopted their own Everett clauses, refusing to partner with airlines that didn't meet basic ethics thresholds. But Amara Everett? She wasn't on magazine covers anymore. She wasn't giving TED Talks. She wasn't even tweeting. She was building. Back in Baltimore, she walked into a public high school named after her, the Amara Everett Center for Civic Leadership. On the walls, photos of students who'd interned with the Passenger Integrity Council. In the halls, a mock ethics lab simulating real-world dilemmas. And in the corner of the library, a small framed plaque read, "This building exists because one woman refused to stay seated after being slapped." Amara stood there with Elias, Noah now walking beside them. She ran her hand gently over the plaque and smiled. Months later, she sat in the back row at the Skybridge Summit in Chicago. She didn't speak. She didn't wave. She just listened. The FAA commissioner took the stage. "This year, we're launching the Everett Index, the world's first cross-airline transparency score measuring ethics, equity, and enforcement," he announced. Cheers erupted, but Amara just whispered to herself, "Let them say my name when I'm not in the room." That, to her, was legacy. Meanwhile, change kept blooming. An AI training program she helped design, ClearFlight, became standard in all flight attendant schools. Instead of memorizing procedures, trainees now practiced human empathy scenarios built off real passenger experiences. And when a new airline from Ghana requested to license the Everett Protocol for global operations, Amara flew out to meet them. They didn't want her money. They wanted her blueprint. And they got it, free of charge. One night, she got a letter, this time from a former Helios employee, Sandra Whitmore, the flight attendant who slapped her. It read, "You don't owe me grace, but I want to say thank you. I didn't understand what I represented that day, how much harm I carried. Casually, I lost my job. I deserved that. But because of you, I also got therapy. I now train young flight crews in Vancouver on de-escalation and equity. I tell them, you don't need to be a villain to do damage, but you do need to be human to do better." Amara folded the letter slowly. She didn't cry. She nodded. Sometimes change came through the back door. That spring, a new federal ethics center opened near DC. Reporters asked why Amara's name wasn't on the building. The chair of the Ethics Council smiled and said, "Because real architects don't need to stamp their name on the blueprints. Every system in here? She built it, On the anniversary of the slap, someone posted a photo on Reddit. It showed a young black mother boarding a plane, holding her baby. 2 flight attendants were kneeling, helping her with the stroller, smiling. The caption said, "We still mess up, but not this time. Not today. Today we got it right." Because of Amara. It went viral, not because it was sensational, but because it was real. And late one night, Amara stood by the window of her home, watching Noah sleep. Elias handed her a mug of tea. She asked softly, "Do you think people will forget what started all this?" He shrugged, thoughtful. "Maybe, but not the system, not the feeling. They won't remember why they feel safer in the sky, but they will. And when they land with dignity, your name will be in the air, even if they don't say it." Outside, a plane soared overhead. No delay, no screaming, no broken pride in aisle 12. Just a quiet, ethical flight, and a sky finally worthy of its passengers. Real change doesn't happen overnight. It takes courage, strategy, and heart. What part of Amara's story hit you the hardest? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one.